K9 dog scratches the girl's backpack. Repeatedly, what was hidden in a side pocket sparked a CPS raid. What happened next will shock you. The story you're about to listen to will leave you speechless. Please like, share, subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. A dog found something that changed everything. What started as an ordinary Tuesday morning at Roosevelt Elementary School turned into a nightmare that no one saw coming. Officer Marcus Kane adjusted his radio and glanced at his watch. 7:35 a.m. Kids were streaming through the metal detectors, their backpacks bouncing as they hurried to beat the morning bell. Beside him, his 4-year-old Belgian Malinois, Bruno, sat perfectly still. The dog's dark eyes scanned each child with professional focus. Bruno wasn't just any school dog. He was a rescue dog with a story of his own. 3 years ago, Marcus had found him half-starved in an abandoned warehouse, chained to a radiator. Now, Bruno was trained to detect drugs, weapons, and something else most people didn't know about. He could sense fear, real bone-deep terror that kids sometimes carried in their backpacks along with their textbooks. "Morning, Officer Kane," called Mrs. Rodriguez, the principal. Her heels clicked against the polished floor as she approached. "Quiet start today?" Marcus nodded, but something felt different. Bruno's ears had perked up. The dog's body tensed in a way Marcus recognized. Someone was coming, someone who needed help. That's when she walked in. The girl couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Her name was Lucy Chen, though Marcus didn't know it yet. Her black hair hung in greasy strands around a face that looked older than it should. The purple backpack on her shoulders seemed to weigh more than she did. Her clothes were wrinkled, like she'd slept in them. Maybe she had. Lucy moved differently than the other kids. While they chattered and laughed, she walked with careful, measured steps. Her eyes darted left and right, checking exits. Her small hands gripped the backpack straps so tightly her knuckles were white. Bruno noticed her before Marcus did. The dog's head snapped up. His nose twitched. Every muscle in his body went rigid. A low, almost inaudible whine escaped his throat. "Easy, boy," Marcus whispered, placing a hand on Bruno's head. But the dog wouldn't be calmed. Lucy approached the metal detector. The machine beeped its usual mechanical greeting as she passed through. Nothing unusual there, but as she walked past Bruno, everything changed. The dog lunged forward so suddenly that Marcus almost lost his grip on the leash. Bruno's paws scraped against the smooth floor as he strained toward Lucy's backpack. His nose pushed against the purple fabric, sniffing frantically at a small side pocket. "Whoa, Bruno, what's gotten into you?" Marcus pulled the leash taut, but Bruno wouldn't back down. The dog began to whine louder, then bark, short, urgent barks that echoed through the hallway. Lucy froze. For the first time since entering the building, real emotion flickered across her face. Fear. Pure, animal fear. Other kids stopped and stared. Teachers poked their heads out of classrooms. The normal morning routine ground to a halt as Bruno continued his frantic barking, his attention laser-focused on that one small pocket. "Miss, could you step to the side for a moment?" Marcus kept his voice gentle. Years of working with traumatized kids had taught him that tone mattered more than words. Lucy didn't move. She stood there like a statue, her breathing quick and shallow. Her eyes were fixed on Bruno, who was now pawing at the air near her backpack. "It's okay," Marcus said softly. "Bruno's a good dog. He just wants to say hello." But that wasn't true, and Marcus knew it. Bruno never acted like this unless something was seriously wrong. The dog was trained to detect danger, and right now, every instinct was telling him that this little girl was in trouble. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared at Marcus's shoulder. "What's happening?" "I'm not sure yet." Marcus studied Lucy's face. The girl hadn't said a word. She just stood there, trembling slightly as Bruno continued his desperate attempts to reach her backpack. "Lucy?" Mrs. Rodriguez tried. "Honey, can you tell us what's wrong?" The girl's lips moved, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted between the adults and the dog, as if calculating her chances of running. Marcus made a decision. "Lucy, I need to check your backpack. Is that okay?" "No." The word came out as barely a whisper. "Please, no." But Bruno's barking was getting more insistent. Other dogs were trained to sit quietly when they found something. Bruno was different. When he sensed a child in danger, he made sure everyone knew it. Sweetie, we just want to help, Mrs. Rodriguez said, kneeling down to Lucy's eye level. Did someone hurt you? Lucy's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head quickly. Too quickly. Marcus had seen this before. The denial, the fear, the way traumatized kids protected their abusers even when help was standing right in front of them. Lucy, he said gently, Bruno is really good at helping people. He helped me once when I was sad. Can we let him help you? The girl looked at Bruno. The dog had stopped barking and was sitting now, his intelligent eyes fixed on her face. His tail wasn't wagging, but it wasn't still either. It moved in tiny, careful movements, like he was trying to tell her something. He won't hurt me? Lucy whispered. Never, Marcus promised. Bruno protects kids. That's his job. Slowly, Lucy nodded. Her hands shook as she slipped the backpack off her shoulders and set it on the floor. Bruno immediately moved forward, his nose going straight to that side pocket. Mrs. Rodriguez unzipped the pocket while Marcus watched Lucy's face. The girl's expression was unreadable, but her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. The principal's gasp echoed through the hallway. Inside the pocket was a small plastic bag, and inside that bag was something no 6-year-old should have to carry. A folded piece of paper covered in a child's careful handwriting, and beneath it, a small digital camera, the kind that was popular 10 years ago. Mrs. Rodriguez's hands trembled as she unfolded the paper. Her face went pale as she read the first few lines. Marcus, she whispered, we need to call someone, right now. But Lucy was already moving. She grabbed for the backpack, tears streaming down her face. Give it back! You can't have it. He said if anyone found it, he'd hurt Tommy. Who's Tommy? Marcus asked, gently catching Lucy's hands before she could snatch the bag away. My baby brother, Lucy sobbed. He's only 3. He's scared of the dark, but Danny locks him in the closet when he cries. I took pictures to show someone, but I didn't know who to tell. I was going to give it to Mrs. Peterson because she's nice, but then Danny said if anyone ever found out, he'd make Tommy disappear forever. The words tumbled out between sobs. Marcus felt his stomach clench as the pieces started falling into place. This wasn't about drugs or weapons. This was about something much worse. Mrs. Rodriguez had pulled out her phone and was already dialing. We need Child Protective Services here immediately, she said into the phone. And police. It's an emergency. Bruno moved closer to Lucy and gently pressed his head against her leg. The girl looked down at him through her tears. He really knew something was wrong, she whispered. Marcus nodded. Bruno has a special gift. He can tell when kids need help, even when they're too scared to ask for it. Lucy reached out with trembling fingers and touched Bruno's head. The dog's tail wagged once, softly. I've been carrying it for 2 weeks, Lucy said quietly. The camera has videos too. I recorded Danny when he thought I was sleeping. I wanted someone to know what he does to us, but I was scared. Mama doesn't believe me when I tell her. She says Danny's just trying to help because she works so much. Marcus's jaw tightened. He'd heard variations of this story too many times. Single mothers working multiple jobs, desperate for help with the kids. Men who seemed charming and helpful at first, until they showed their true faces. Where's your mom now? He asked. Work. She cleans offices at night and sleeps during the day. Danny watches us. Lucy's voice was flat now, like she was reciting facts. He makes me go to school so nobody gets suspicious, but Tommy has to stay home. Danny says Tommy's too little for school, but really he just doesn't want anyone to see the marks. Mrs. Rodriguez had finished her phone call and was kneeling beside them again. Lucy, honey, some people are coming to help you and Tommy. They're going to make sure you're both safe. But what if Danny finds out I told? What if he hurts Tommy before they get there? Marcus looked at Mrs. Rodriguez, who nodded. She understood what needed to happen next. Lucy, can you tell us your address? Marcus asked. We're going to send people to help Tommy right now, while you're safe here with us. The girl rattled off an address on the south side of town. Marcus knew the area. Run-down apartments where landlords didn't ask too many questions and neighbors minded their own business. Mrs. Rodriguez was back on the phone, this time giving the address to someone who would act fast. Marcus hoped it would be fast enough. Lucy, he said, sitting cross-legged on the floor so he was at her eye level. You did something incredibly brave today. Do you know that? She shook her head. I was scared. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared. You protected your little brother the only way you could." Bruno had settled down next to Lucy, his warm body pressed against her side. The dog seemed to understand that his job wasn't done yet. He needed to keep this little girl calm, while the adults handled the emergency she'd been carrying around in a purple backpack. "Can Bruno come with me?" Lucy asked. "When they take me to see Tommy." Marcus looked at the dog, who was watching Lucy with gentle brown eyes. Bruno had been through his own trauma. Maybe that's why he was so good at recognizing it in others. "We'll see what we can do," Marcus promised. In the distance, sirens were already wailing. Help was coming. But Marcus knew that for Lucy and Tommy, the real healing would take much longer than a rescue mission. Lucy seemed to sense his thoughts. "Will Tommy be okay?" she whispered. "He's so little. He doesn't understand why Danny is so mean." "We're going to make sure both of you are okay," Marcus said, hoping he could keep that promise. Bruno lifted his head and looked toward the school entrance. His ears pricked up at the sound of approaching vehicles. The dog's training told him that his part in this rescue was just beginning. As they waited for the authorities to arrive, Lucy kept one hand buried in Bruno's thick fur. The dog sat perfectly still, as if he understood that his most important job right now was simply being there, being a steady, warm presence for a little girl who had been carrying an impossible burden. The morning sun streamed through the school's front windows, casting long shadows across the hallway, where a dog's instincts had just changed two children's lives forever. What had started as a routine security check was about to become a race against time to save a 3-year-old boy who didn't even know help was coming. Bruno's nose twitched one more time as he caught the scent of the approaching officers. His tail wagged slowly, deliberately. He knew what came next would be difficult, but he also knew something else. Sometimes the smallest voices carried the biggest truths, and sometimes it took a dog to help the humans hear them. The first police car pulled up to Roosevelt Elementary just as the morning bell rang. Detective Sarah Walsh stepped out, her experienced eyes immediately scanning the scene. She'd worked child abuse cases for 8 years, but something about the urgency in Mrs. Rodriguez's voice over the phone had made her drive faster than usual. Inside the school, Marcus was still sitting with Lucy and Bruno when Detective Walsh appeared in the hallway. Lucy pressed closer to the dog, her small hand gripping his fur tighter. "This is Detective Walsh," Marcus said gently. "She's here to help Tommy." Lucy looked up at the woman with suspicious eyes. Adults had let her down before. "Are you really going to get my brother?" Detective Walsh knelt down, her voice soft but serious. "Lucy, I need you to be very brave and tell me exactly what's on that camera. Can you do that?" Mrs. Rodriguez handed over the plastic bag containing the camera and the handwritten note. Walsh's expression darkened as she read Lucy's careful words. "Danny hits Tommy when he cries. He locks him in the dark closet. Mama doesn't know because she's sleeping. I took pictures so someone would believe me." "Lucy, how long has Danny been living with you?" Detective Walsh asked. 6 months, Lucy whispered, "since Mama lost her other job and couldn't pay rent. Danny said he'd help with money if he could stay with us." Walsh exchanged a meaningful look with Marcus. The Predator's playbook was always the same. Find vulnerable families, offer help, gain trust, then show their true nature when it was too late to easily escape. "I need to see what's on this camera," Walsh said, standing up. "Mrs. Rodriguez, is there somewhere private we can view this?" They moved to the principal's office. Lucy refused to let go of Bruno, so the dog came too, his presence the only thing keeping the little girl calm. Walsh turned on the small digital camera and clicked through to the video files. There were 7 of them, each one more disturbing than the last. The first video showed a cramped apartment living room. Lucy's whispered voice narrated from behind the camera. "It's Tuesday. Mama's at her night job. Danny doesn't know I'm awake." On the small screen, a man's voice could be heard yelling, "Tommy, stop that crying or I'll give you something to really cry about." The camera shook as Lucy tried to get a better angle. Through a partially open bedroom door, they could see a man named Danny Morse grabbing a small boy by the arm. Tommy couldn't have been more than 3 years old. His face was red from crying, and there were already fading bruises on his thin arms. "Danny always waits until Mama's gone," Lucy's voice continued on the recording. "He acts nice when she's here, but when she leaves..." The second video was worse. It showed Danny dragging Tommy toward a small closet. The toddler was screaming, reaching for Lucy, but she could only whisper from her hiding spot behind the couch. Please don't put me in the dark place, Tommy's tiny voice pleaded on the recording. I'll be good. I promise I'll be good. But Danny shoved him inside anyway and turned the lock. The sound of Tommy's terrified screams from inside the closet made Detective Walsh's jaw clench. How long does he leave him in there? Walsh asked Lucy, who was now crying silently. Sometimes all night, Lucy whispered. Tommy wets himself because he's too scared to ask to come out. Then Danny gets mad about that too. The third video showed the aftermath. Tommy sitting in a corner, rocking back and forth, his thumb in his mouth. His eyes had that distant look that Walsh recognized from other abuse cases, the look of a child who had learned that the world wasn't safe. I try to take care of him when Danny's not looking, Lucy explained. I sneak him crackers and water. I sing to him quietly so he knows he's not alone. Walsh fast-forwarded through the remaining videos. Each one documented different instances of abuse. Danny yelling at Tommy for being too loud. Danny refusing to feed him because he needed to learn respect. Danny forcing the toddler to stand in a corner for hours as punishment for crying. But it was the final video that made Walsh's blood run cold. The timestamp showed it was recorded just 3 days ago. Danny was on the phone with someone, his voice carrying clearly across the small apartment. Yeah, the kid's getting too old anyway, Danny was saying. Little girl's starting to ask too many questions. I might need to relocate soon. Got any leads on new situations? The person on the other end of the call was inaudible, but Danny's response was chilling. No, don't worry about the boy. He's young enough that he won't remember much. And if he does... Danny's laugh was cold. Well, who's going to believe a traumatized 3-year-old? Walsh turned off the camera and immediately grabbed her radio. This is Detective Walsh. I need all available units to 847 Maple Street, apartment 3B. Possible child endangerment in progress. Suspect may be planning to flee. She turned to Marcus. I need you to stay here with Lucy. We're going to get Tommy, but this could get complicated. What if Danny runs? Lucy asked, her voice tiny with fear. What if he takes Tommy with him? That's not going to happen, Walsh promised. But even as she said it, she was calculating response times and worst-case scenarios. Her radio crackled to life. Unit 47 to Detective Walsh. We're approaching the apartment building now. What's our situation? Possible child abuse victim inside, age 3. Adult male suspect, mid-30s, may be armed. Approach with caution but move fast. This guy's been talking about relocating. The next 20 minutes felt like hours. Lucy sat curled up against Bruno, who seemed to sense her anxiety and kept nudging her gently with his nose. Marcus paced near the window, his phone pressed to his ear as he coordinated with the responding units. Mrs. Rodriguez had cleared the hallway of other students, but word was spreading through the school teachers kept peeking out of classrooms, their faces filled with concern. Finally, Walsh's radio crackled again. Detective Walsh, this is Sergeant Martinez. We've entered the apartment. Everyone in the principal's office held their breath. Suspect is not on the premises. Repeat, Danny Morse is not here. But we found the child. Lucy sat up straighter. Is Tommy okay? Walsh held up a hand for quiet as she listened to the radio report. Child appears to be locked in a bedroom closet. He's conscious, but very frightened. We need paramedics for evaluation. There are visible signs of abuse. Oh, God, Lucy whispered. He locked Tommy up before he left. Tommy's been in the dark all morning. Walsh spoke into her radio. Sergeant, the child's name is Tommy. He's 3 years old. His sister is here with me. She says he's terrified of dark spaces, so approach very carefully. Copy that. Paramedics are on scene now. The radio went quiet for several long minutes. Then Sergeant Martinez's voice came through again, gentler this time. Detective Walsh, we have the child. He's asking for his sister Lucy. Can we tell him she's safe? Lucy jumped up. Tell him I'm coming. Tell him Lucy's coming to get him. Walsh nodded to Marcus, who immediately understood. They needed to get Lucy to her brother as quickly as possible. Mrs. Rodriguez, can you arrange for someone to drive us to the hospital? Walsh asked. I'll drive you myself, the principal replied without hesitation. As they prepared to leave, Walsh's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and frowned. This is Detective Walsh. The voice on the other end was tense. Detective, this is Officer Park. We found Danny Morse's truck abandoned about 2 miles from the apartment. Looks like he ditched it in a hurry. There's cash scattered on the passenger seat and a bag of what appears to be methamphetamine. Walsh closed her eyes. The situation was getting more complicated by the minute. Any sign of where he might have gone? We're checking with local motels and bus stations, but this guy seems to know what he's doing. My guess is he had an escape plan ready. Lucy had been listening to every word. Detective Walsh, what if Danny comes back? What if he tries to hurt Tommy at the hospital? That's not going to happen, Walsh said firmly. We're going to have officers at the hospital, and once we get there, you and Tommy are going to be placed in protective custody until we find Danny. But even as she said it, Walsh knew that finding Danny Morse wasn't going to be easy. Men like him had networks. They helped each other disappear when things got too hot. As they walked toward Mrs. Rodriguez's car, Bruno trotted alongside Lucy, his leash held loosely in Marcus's hand. The dog seemed to understand that his job was far from over. Can Bruno come to the hospital? Lucy asked. Tommy loves dogs. He always wanted one, but Danny said pets were too much trouble. Marcus looked at Detective Walsh, who nodded. Under the circumstances, I think we can make an exception. The drive to St. Mary's Hospital took 15 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. Lucy pressed her face to the window, watching the familiar neighborhoods blur past. Everything looked different now. The world she'd known this morning, the world where she had to carry terrible secrets in a purple backpack, was gone forever. Lucy, Detective Walsh said from the front seat, I want you to know that what you did today probably saved your brother's life. That took incredible courage. I just wanted someone to believe me, Lucy said quietly. Adults always believe other adults, even when kids tell the truth. The words hung in the car like a challenge. Walsh had heard similar statements from other child victims, and each time, it reminded her why her job mattered so much. They pulled up to the hospital's emergency entrance. Walsh's phone immediately started ringing. Detective Walsh, this is Dr. Chen in the ER. We have Tommy here. He's physically okay, just dehydrated and scared. But there's something you need to know. What is it? This little boy has been systematically abused for months. The psychological trauma is severe. He won't let anyone touch him except to whisper his sister's name. We really need Lucy here as soon as possible. We're walking in right now, Walsh said. As they entered the hospital, Lucy's steps quickened. Bruno kept pace beside her, his presence a steady comfort in a world that had turned upside down. At the nurse's station, a young doctor approached them. Are you Lucy? She nodded, suddenly shy among all the strange adults. Your brother has been asking for you nonstop. He's going to be so happy to see you. They followed the doctor down a corridor lined with examination rooms. At the end of the hall, they could hear a small voice calling out, Lucy? Lucy, where are you? Lucy broke into a run, Bruno right beside her. When she reached the room, she saw Tommy sitting on an examination table, his small body dwarfed by a hospital gown that was far too big for him. The moment Tommy saw his sister, his face transformed. The fear and confusion melted away, replaced by pure relief. Lucy, he cried, reaching for her with both arms. I was in the dark place again, but then nice people came and got me. Lucy hugged her little brother tightly, tears streaming down her face. I know, Tommy, I know, but it's okay now. Danny can't hurt you anymore. Tommy noticed Bruno, and his eyes went wide. Lucy, there's a doggy! This is Bruno, Lucy said, wiping her tears. He's the one who helped me tell the nice people about Danny. Tommy reached out hesitantly to pet Bruno's head. The dog remained perfectly still, letting the traumatized child set the pace. He's soft, Tommy whispered in wonder. Can he stay with us? Detective Walsh watched the reunion from the doorway, her phone buzzing with updates about the search for Danny Morse. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was the sight of two children who were finally safe, finally together, and finally free to be kids again. But she knew their story was far from over. Danny was still out there somewhere, and until he was caught, these children would always be looking over their shoulders. What Detective Walsh didn't know was that Danny Morse was closer than anyone imagined, and his next move would test everyone's resolve. Comment below if you think Danny will try to come back for the children, and what would you do if you were in Detective Walsh's position? 3 hours later, As Lucy and Tommy sat together in the hospital room, sharing a cup of chocolate pudding, Detective Walsh was in the hallway reviewing the case files that had just arrived from Child Protective Services. What she found made her stomach turn. Danny Morse wasn't just an abusive boyfriend. He was part of something much bigger and much more dangerous. The CPS worker, Janet Miller, had been investigating similar cases across 3 counties. Detective Walsh, I've been tracking this pattern for 2 years. Danny Morse has been moving from family to family, always targeting single mothers with small children. Walsh looked up from the thick file folder. How many families? At least 7 that we know of. Always the same story. He offers to help with bills, moves in, gains trust, then starts isolating the children. The mothers work long hours and don't see what's happening until it's too late. Janet opened another folder. Look at this. Rebecca Martinez, divorced mother of 2 in Springfield. Danny lived with them for 4 months last year. When neighbors finally called police, they found her 6-year-old son locked in a basement storage room. Walsh studied the photos. The similarities to Tommy's case were unmistakable. What happened to Danny then? Gone by the time police arrived, just like today. Rebecca was so traumatized she couldn't even give a clear description. Said Danny had convinced her that her son was acting out and needed firm discipline. The file contained similar stories from different towns. Each time, Danny would appear when families were most vulnerable. Each time, he'd leave before authorities could catch him. And each time, he left behind traumatized children and devastated mothers. There's something else, Janet said quietly. We think Danny might be connected to a larger network. We've found evidence that he's been photographing and recording the abuse, possibly selling the material online. Walsh felt her blood run cold. Do you think he recorded Lucy and Tommy? It's possible. Lucy's videos show she was documenting his behavior, but there might be other recordings we haven't found yet. Back in Tommy's hospital room, Lucy was reading him a picture book about a brave little rabbit. Tommy's eyes kept drifting to Bruno, who was lying on the floor beside the bed. Every few minutes, the dog would lift his head and check on both children, as if making sure they were still safe. "Lucy," Tommy whispered, "is Mama coming to see us?" Lucy's face fell. Their mother, Rita Chen, was still at work, unaware that her world had been turned upside down. She wouldn't get home until noon, and even then, she might not realize anything was wrong until evening. "Detective Walsh is going to call Mama," Lucy said softly. "She'll come as soon as she knows we're here." But Lucy was worried about more than just when their mother would arrive. She was worried about how their mother would react. Rita had been so grateful when Danny offered to help with the children and the bills. She'd called him a godsend more than once. Tommy cuddled closer to his sister. "Lucy, will Danny come back?" It was the question Lucy had been dreading. She looked at Bruno, who seemed to sense her distress, and moved closer to the bed. "I don't know," she admitted. "But Detective Walsh promised that police officers will stay with us. And Bruno's here too." At the mention of his name, Bruno's tail wagged once. The dog had been unusually alert all afternoon. His ears pricked at every sound in the hallway. Marcus had noticed it too, and wondered if Bruno sensed something the humans couldn't. Dr. Chen, the emergency room physician, knocked softly on the doorframe. "Lucy, Tommy, how are you both feeling?" "My tummy doesn't hurt anymore," Tommy said shyly. "The nice nurse gave me crackers." Dr. Chen smiled. "That's good. Tommy, I need to ask you some questions, okay? Just to make sure you're healthy." Tommy nodded, but his grip on Lucy's hand tightened. "Can you tell me about the place where Danny made you stay sometimes?" "The small room?" Tommy's eyes went wide. "The dark place? I don't like the dark place. It smells funny and there's scary noises." "What kind of noises?" "Like monsters breathing, and sometimes water dripping. And once I heard Danny talking to someone, but I couldn't see who." Dr. Chen and Lucy exchanged glances. Lucy remembered hearing voices too, late at night when she thought everyone was sleeping. "Tommy, when you were in the dark place, did Danny ever bring a camera? Something that made clicking sounds or had lights?" Tommy thought for a moment. "Sometimes there was a little red light, like a tiny star. But Danny said if I looked at it or talked about it, he'd put me in the dark place forever." Lucy felt sick. Danny had been recording Tommy's abuse, just like Janet Miller suspected. Those recordings were evidence, but they were also horrible memories that would haunt her little brother forever. Dr. Chen made notes in Tommy's chart. Tommy, you're very brave for telling us these things. It helps us make sure you stay safe. After the doctor left, Lucy sat quietly with her thoughts. The weight of everything that had happened was starting to sink in. This morning, she'd been a 6-year-old girl carrying a terrible secret. Now, she was the key witness in a criminal investigation. Marcus appeared in the doorway with Detective Walsh. Bruno immediately stood up, his attention focused on something beyond the hospital room. Lucy, we need to talk to you about something important, Walsh said gently. Your mother is on her way here. She should arrive in about an hour. Is she mad at me? Lucy asked in a small voice. Why would she be mad at you? Because I told about Danny. Because I broke up our family. Walsh knelt beside the hospital bed. Lucy, listen to me very carefully. You didn't break up anything. Danny was hurting you and Tommy. You saved your brother by being brave enough to ask for help. But Lucy wasn't convinced. She'd seen how happy their mother was when Danny helped with the rent money. She'd heard Rita tell her friends that Danny was wonderful with the kids. What if Mama doesn't believe me? Lucy whispered. What if she thinks I'm lying? She's going to see the videos you took, Walsh explained. She's going to see the evidence. There won't be any doubt about what Danny was doing. Marcus sat down in the chair beside the bed. Lucy, can I tell you something about my partner Bruno here? Lucy nodded, grateful for any distraction from her worried thoughts. When I first found Bruno, he was hurt and scared. He'd been treated badly by someone he trusted. For a long time, he wouldn't let anyone get close to him. Bruno moved to Marcus's side, as if he understood they were talking about him. But you know what I learned? Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us let us down. That doesn't mean we stop trusting everyone. It means we learn to recognize the good people from the bad people. Lucy considered this. How do you know who's good? Good people listen when you tell them something's wrong. Good people believe you when you ask for help. Good people put your safety first, even when it's hard. Bruno walked over to Lucy and gently placed his head on the hospital bed near her hand. She scratched behind his ears, feeling some of her tension ease. Officer Marcus, she said quietly, what happens to me and Tommy now? Where do we live? It was the question Walsh had been dreading. The truth was, they didn't know yet. Rita Chen was about to face an impossible situation. Her boyfriend was wanted for child abuse. Her children needed intensive counseling, and she'd have to confront the fact that she'd unknowingly put them in danger. First, we make sure you're both safe, Walsh said. Then we help your family heal from what Danny did. Tommy had fallen asleep during the conversation, his small body finally relaxing after hours of stress. Lucy looked down at her brother, his face peaceful for the first time in months. He used to laugh all the time, she said softly. Before Danny came to live with us, Tommy would giggle at everything. Funny faces, silly songs, even when I dropped my cereal on the floor. He'll laugh again, Marcus promised. It might take time, but kids are stronger than we think. Outside in the hallway, Walsh's phone was ringing. Constantly. The search for Danny Morse was expanding as more evidence came to light. His abandoned truck had yielded fingerprints that connected him to 2 other unsolved cases of child abuse, but Danny himself remained a ghost. At 2:30 p.m., Rita Chen burst through the hospital doors. She was still wearing her cleaning uniform, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her face was streaked with tears, and her hands shook as she approached the nurse's station. My children, she said breathlessly. Lucy and Tommy Chen. Please, I need to see them. Detective Walsh intercepted her before she could reach Tommy's room. Mrs. Chen, I'm Detective Walsh. We spoke on the phone. Where are my babies? Are they hurt? The officer who called me said Danny ... Rita's voice broke. He said Danny was arrested for hurting them. Walsh guided Rita to a quiet corner. Mrs. Chen, Danny hasn't been arrested yet. He ran when police came to your apartment, but we have evidence that he was abusing your children. Rita's legs gave out. She sank into a plastic chair, her face pale. That's impossible. Danny loves those kids. He helps me take care of them. He would never... Mrs. Chen, Lucy recorded videos of the abuse. She documented everything Danny was doing to Tommy when you were at work. No, Rita whispered. No, you're wrong. Lucy would have told me if something was wrong. Did she try to tell you? Rita's face crumpled as memories flooded back. Lucy asking why Danny was so strict. Tommy crying more than usual. The way both children seemed nervous when Danny was around. Oh God, Rita breathed. I didn't listen. I thought Lucy was just jealous because I was spending time with Danny. I thought Tommy was going through a phase. Walsh had seen this reaction many times before. The guilt, the self-blame, the desperate need to rewrite history. But Rita's children needed her to be strong now, not broken by regret. Mrs. Chen, what matters now is that your children are safe. They need you to focus on helping them heal. Can I see them, please? Walsh nodded and led Rita down the hallway to Tommy's room. As they approached, they could hear Lucy's voice reading softly to her brother. Rita stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. Both her children looked smaller than she remembered. Tommy was curled up against Lucy, his thumb in his mouth. Lucy's eyes were older, more serious than a 6-year-old should be. Mama? Lucy looked up, uncertainty in her voice. Rita rushed to the bed and wrapped both children in her arms. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you. Tommy woke up at the sound of his mother's voice. Mama, Lucy saved me from the dark place. Rita looked at her daughter with new eyes. Lucy had been forced to become the protector, the one who documented abuse and found a way to ask for help. She'd been braver than any adult in this situation. Lucy, why didn't you tell me what Danny was doing? Lucy looked down at her hands. I tried, Mama, but you were always tired, and Danny said if I told anyone, he'd hurt Tommy worse. He said you wouldn't believe me anyway, because you loved him more than us. The words hit Rita like physical blows. She remembered brushing off Lucy's concerns, telling her daughter that Danny was just trying to help them be better kids. I believe you now, Rita said firmly. I believe every word, and I promise Danny will never hurt either of you again. But even as she made that promise, Rita knew it might be harder to keep than she hoped. Danny was still out there somewhere, and according to Detective Walsh, he had connections that could help him disappear permanently. Bruno, who had been quietly observing the family reunion, suddenly stood up. His ears were alert, and his nose was twitching. Marcus noticed the change in the dog's behavior immediately. What is it, boy? Marcus asked, moving to the window. In the parking lot below, a figure in a baseball cap was walking between the cars, looking up at the hospital windows. Even from a distance, Marcus could see that the man was searching for something, or someone. Marcus grabbed his radio. Detective Walsh, we might have a problem. But when Walsh looked out the window, the figure was gone. What none of them realized was that Danny Morse had been watching the hospital for the past hour, and he'd just figured out exactly which room held the 2 children who could destroy his entire operation. Let us know in the comments. Do you think Danny is planning something dangerous, or is he just trying to run away for good? That evening, Marcus sat in his apartment staring at Bruno, who was lying by the front door instead of his usual spot on the couch. The dog hadn't relaxed since they'd left the hospital. Every few minutes, Bruno would lift his head and look toward the door, as if expecting trouble to walk through it. Marcus understood the feeling. He'd been a police officer for 12 years, but something about today had shaken him more than usual. Maybe it was the way Lucy had looked at him, with those old, tired eyes. Maybe it was Tommy's small voice asking if the dark place was gone forever. Or maybe it was the memory of his own daughter, Emma, who he hadn't seen in 3 years. Emma would be 8 now, the same age Lucy would be in 2 years. Marcus had lost custody of Emma when his ex-wife moved to California. She'd claimed his job was too dangerous, that he was never home, that Emma needed stability he couldn't provide. She'd been right about some of it. Marcus did work long hours. His job was dangerous. But what she hadn't understood was that cases like Lucy and Tommy's were exactly why he couldn't quit. Someone had to stand between predators and innocent children. His phone buzzed with a text from Detective Walsh. Any word from Bruno? He seemed on edge when you left. Marcus typed back, still alert. Thinks we're not done with this case. The truth was, Marcus trusted Bruno's instincts more than most humans. The dog had an uncanny ability to sense danger before it arrived. If Bruno was worried, there was probably a good reason. Marcus walked to his kitchen window and looked out at the street. Everything appeared normal. Quiet suburban neighborhood, porch lights glowing, families settling in for the night. But something felt wrong. His phone rang. It was Walsh. Marcus, we have a problem. Danny Morse was spotted at a gas station 6 blocks from the hospital. Security camera caught him filling up a red sedan at 6:15 p.m. Marcus felt his stomach drop. He's planning something. That's what I'm afraid of. The gas station clerk said Danny asked for directions to the cheapest motel in town. But here's the thing. There are 3 motels between that gas station and the hospital. He could be staying at any of them. Or none of them, Marcus said grimly. He could be using the motels as cover while he scouts the hospital. My thoughts exactly. I've got units patrolling all 3 locations, but Marcus, I think we need to move the children. Move them where? Safe house, at least until we catch Danny. Marcus looked at Bruno, who had now moved to the window and was staring out at the street with intense focus. Walsh, what about the family? Rita just got her kids back. If we separate them now... I know it's not ideal, but Marcus, this guy isn't just running. He's planning something. The profile we're building suggests he's desperate enough to try anything. After hanging up, Marcus sat in his living room, trying to make sense of the day's events. This morning, he'd been a school resource officer doing routine security checks. Tonight, he was personally invested in the safety of 2 traumatized children. It reminded him too much of the night he'd lost Emma. 3 years ago, Marcus had been working a domestic violence case. A man named Robert Vega had been terrorizing his ex-girlfriend and her 2 young sons. Marcus had spent weeks building the case, collecting evidence, working with social services to keep the family safe. But on the night they were supposed to arrest Vega, he'd shown up at Marcus's house instead. "You want to play hero, Officer Kane?" Vega had yelled from the street. "Let's see how you like it when someone threatens your family." Emma had been spending the weekend with Marcus. She was 5 years old, excited about a movie they were planning to watch together, when Vega started throwing rocks at the windows and screaming threats. Emma had hidden in her bedroom closet. Marcus had called for backup and managed to arrest Vega without anyone getting hurt, but the damage was done. Emma's mother used the incident to argue that Marcus's job put their daughter at risk. Within 2 months, she'd moved to California and severely limited Marcus's visitation rights. "I can't let Emma be collateral damage in your war against bad guys," she'd said during their final custody hearing. Marcus had lost his daughter to protect other people's children. Now, looking at Bruno's worried expression, he wondered if he was about to make the same mistake again. His phone buzzed with another message from Walsh. "Hospital security found something. Can you meet me there in 20 minutes? Marcus grabbed his keys and looked at Bruno. "Come on, boy. Looks like our shift isn't over." The drive to St. Mary's Hospital took 15 minutes through empty streets. Marcus kept checking his mirrors, but saw no sign of the red sedan Danny had been driving. He found Detective Walsh in the hospital parking garage, standing next to a security guard who looked nervous. "What did you find?" Marcus asked. The security guard, whose name tag read Jim Morrison, pointed to a concrete pillar near the stairwell. "Someone scratched something into the paint here. Look." Marcus bent down to examine the pillar. Carved roughly into the gray paint were the words, "Room 314. They took what's mine." "That's Tommy's room number," Walsh said quietly. Bruno immediately began sniffing around the pillar, his nose working frantically. After a few seconds, he sat down and looked at Marcus with an expression that clearly said, "Danger?" "How long ago was this done?" Marcus asked. Jim shrugged. "Could have been any time in the last few hours. I do rounds every 2 hours, and I didn't notice it at 4 p.m., but it was definitely here at 6 p.m. Walsh was already on her radio, calling for additional security at the hospital. But Marcus was thinking about something else. Walsh, those words. They took what's mine. Danny doesn't think of Lucy and Tommy as victims. He thinks of them as his property, which means he's not planning to run. He's planning to take them back. They rode the elevator to the 3rd floor in tense silence. Bruno pressed against Marcus's leg, his body radiating alertness. When the doors opened, they could see 2 police officers stationed outside, room 314. "Any problems up here?" Walsh asked the officers. "Quiet all evening," Officer Martinez replied. "Family's been resting. Kids are asleep." Walsh knocked softly on the door before entering. Rita was dozing in a chair beside Tommy's bed, her hand resting protectively on her son's arm. Lucy was awake, staring at the ceiling. "Lucy, honey, how are you feeling?" Walsh asked softly. "Scared," Lucy admitted. "I keep thinking about what Danny said on the phone, about relocating. What if he comes to take us away?" Marcus sat down beside the bed. Lucy, that's not going to happen. We have police officers right outside your door. But Danny's really smart, Lucy whispered. He always found ways to trick Mama. What if he tricks the police too? It was a fair question, and Marcus didn't have a good answer. Danny Morse had managed to evade law enforcement across multiple states. He had connections and resources that made him more dangerous than a typical domestic abuser. Bruno walked over to Lucy's bedside and gently placed his head on the blanket near her hand. The gesture was so tender that Lucy's eyes filled with tears. Bruno knows I'm scared, doesn't he? She asked. Bruno knows a lot of things, Marcus said. Right now, he knows his job is to keep you safe. Rita stirred in her chair and opened her eyes. When she saw Detective Walsh and Marcus, she immediately sat up straighter. Is everything okay? Has something happened? Walsh hesitated, then decided honesty was the best approach. Mrs. Chen, we have reason to believe Danny might try to contact you or the children. We're increasing security as a precaution. Rita's face went pale. He's here? In the hospital? We don't think so, but he was seen in the area earlier today. What does he want? Marcus and Walsh exchanged glances. The truth was that Danny probably wanted to eliminate the witnesses who could put him in prison for the rest of his life. But they couldn't say that to a mother who was already traumatized. We think he might try to intimidate you into not pressing charges, Walsh said diplomatically. But Lucy was too smart to be fooled by adult euphemisms. He wants to hurt us so we can't tell anyone what he did, doesn't he? The room fell silent. Even Tommy, who had been sleeping, seemed to sense the tension and moved closer to his sister. Lucy, Marcus said carefully, sometimes when bad people get caught, they make poor decisions. That's why we have police officers here. That's why Bruno is here, to make sure Danny can't make any more poor decisions. Lucy studied Marcus's face. Officer Marcus, will you tell me the truth about something? If I can. Are you scared too? Marcus considered lying, giving her the reassuring adult answer. But Lucy had been lied to and dismissed by too many adults already. Yes, he said simply. I'm scared because I care about what happens to you and Tommy. But being scared doesn't mean we can't handle whatever comes next. Lucy nodded, seeming to understand. That's what I told Tommy when Danny locked him in the closet. I said it was okay to be scared as long as we didn't give up. The wisdom in her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. This 6-year-old girl had been forced to become a protector, a counselor, a source of strength for her little brother. She'd carried burdens that most adults couldn't handle. At that moment, Marcus made a decision that would change all their lives. Lucy, how would you feel if Bruno stayed here tonight? Not just in the hallway, but right here in your room. Lucy's face lit up for the first time all day. Really? He can sleep here? If it's okay with your mom and the doctors. Rita nodded immediately. Anything that helps them feel safe. Walsh raised an eyebrow. Marcus, are you sure about this? Bruno's not exactly a therapy dog. No, Marcus agreed. He's better. He's a protector who happens to be very good at reading people. As if to prove the point, Bruno walked over to Tommy and gently licked the little boy's hand. Tommy giggled, the first sound of pure joy he'd made since the rescue. The doggy likes me, Tommy whispered to Lucy. Bruno likes everyone who needs help, Lucy explained to her brother. He's kind of like a superhero, but with fur. Walsh's radio crackled to life. Detective Walsh, this is Unit 12. We have a situation at the Sunrise Motel. Manager says a man matching Danny Morse's description checked in an hour ago. But when we knocked on his door, the room was empty. Window was open, and there are fresh footprints in the dirt outside. Walsh's jaw tightened. He's close, and he's moving. Marcus looked at Bruno, who had positioned himself between the door and the children's beds. The dog's training told him to stay alert, but his instincts told him something else. This wasn't just about law enforcement anymore. This was about family. Walsh, Marcus said quietly, I think we need to consider moving the children tonight. Where? Marcus thought about his empty apartment, his quiet neighborhood, his own loneliness that had become a constant companion since losing Emma. My place, he said, at least temporarily, until we can set up something more permanent. Rita looked up sharply. Officer Kane, I appreciate everything you've done, but my children have been through enough disruption. Mrs. Chen, With respect, Danny knows where you live. He knows where you work. He knows your routines. But he doesn't know where I live. Walsh was nodding slowly. It's not a bad idea. Your place is secure, and Bruno would be more comfortable in familiar territory. What about me? Rita asked. I'm not leaving my children. You'd come too, of course, all of you together until Danny's caught. Lucy had been listening to the adult conversation with growing excitement. Does this mean Bruno would be like our roommate? Marcus smiled despite the seriousness of the situation. Something like that. Tommy clapped his hands together. Can we play with Bruno? Can he sleep in our room? We'll work out all the details, Marcus promised. But as they began making plans for the temporary living arrangement, none of them noticed the maintenance worker who had been mopping the hallway outside their room for the past 20 minutes. None of them saw him pocket the small recording device he'd been using to listen to their conversation, and none of them realized that Danny Morse now knew exactly where they were planning to go. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Marcus is making the right choice, or is he walking into Danny's trap? 2 hours later, Marcus was loading the last of the children's belongings into his patrol car when Bruno started acting strange again. The dog kept looking back at the hospital entrance, his ears flat against his head. What is it, boy? Marcus asked, but Bruno just whined softly and pressed closer to Lucy, who was holding Tommy's hand in the back seat. Rita sat in the front passenger seat, clutching a small bag of her own belongings. Officer Kane, are you sure about this? Taking us to your home? It's the safest option right now, Marcus replied, though Bruno's behavior was making him second-guess everything. The drive to Marcus's house should have taken 15 minutes, but as they pulled out of the hospital parking lot, Marcus noticed a red sedan following them at a distance. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. Walsh, he said into his radio, I think we have a tail. Red sedan? Affirmative. License plate ... Marcus squinted in his rearview mirror, but the car was staying too far back to read clearly. Take the long way to your house. If he's still following after 3 turns, we'll know for sure. Marcus made a right turn onto Maple Street. The sedan followed, left onto Oak Avenue, still there, right onto Pine Road. The red car stayed exactly 4 car lengths behind. He's definitely following us, Marcus reported. Lucy had noticed the tension in the adults' voices. Is Danny behind us? She whispered. Marcus met her eyes in the rearview mirror. Don't worry, sweetheart. We're going to handle this. But privately, Marcus was calculating options. They were still 10 minutes from his house, and leading Danny directly to his home address seemed like a terrible idea. His radio crackled. All units, we have Danny Morse's vehicle in pursuit of Officer Kane, converging on Pine Road now. Within minutes, Marcus could see police cars approaching from side streets. The red sedan suddenly accelerated, pulling alongside Marcus's patrol car. Danny Morse was behind the wheel, and his face was twisted with rage. He rolled down his window and shouted, "Those kids belong with me! You don't understand what you're destroying!" Tommy started crying at the sound of Danny's voice. Lucy wrapped her arms around her brother, whispering, "It's okay, Tommy. He can't hurt us anymore." But Danny wasn't finished. At the next red light, he jumped out of his car and ran toward Marcus's vehicle. In his hand was something that made Marcus's blood run cold. "He's got a gun!" Marcus shouted into his radio. "Suspect is armed and approaching my vehicle with civilians inside." Danny reached Marcus's car and pounded on the window. Rita, tell them the truth. Tell them I was helping your family. Tell them these kids are lying." Rita stared at Danny through the glass, seeing him clearly for the first time. This wasn't the helpful, charming man who had offered to solve her problems. This was a predator who had terrorized her children while she worked nights to keep their family afloat. "You hurt my babies," Rita said, her voice steady despite her fear. "You hurt them, and you made me blind to it." Danny's face contorted with fury. He raised the gun toward the window, but before he could do anything else, Bruno launched himself at the glass from inside the car. The dog's powerful body hit the window with such force that the safety glass spiderwebbed, but didn't break. Danny stumbled backward, startled by the dog's ferocious barking and scratching. That moment of distraction was all the approaching police officers needed. "Drop your weapon! Get on the ground now!" Danny spun around, the gun still in his hand. For a terrifying second, Marcus thought Danny might start shooting at the police cars. But then Detective Walsh's voice cut through the chaos. "Danny Morse, you're surrounded. There's nowhere to run this time. Danny looked around wildly. Police cars had blocked every escape route. Officers were approaching with weapons drawn, moving with the careful precision of professionals who knew exactly how dangerous this situation was. "This is all wrong," Danny screamed. "I was helping that family. Those kids need discipline. They need structure." "What they needed was safety," Walsh called back. "What they needed was someone who wouldn't lock a 3-year-old in a closet." "You don't understand." Danny's voice was getting higher, more desperate. "I've been doing this for years. I help broken families. I fix problem children." The admission hung in the air like a confession. Marcus realized that Danny was so delusional, so convinced of his own twisted logic, that he genuinely believed he was some kind of savior. "Danny, put the gun down," Walsh said gently. "Let's talk about this." For a moment, it looked like Danny might comply. His arm lowered slightly, and his grip on the weapon seemed to relax. But then Lucy's voice carried through the cracked window of Marcus's patrol car. "You're not a helper," she said, her 6-year-old voice clear and unafraid. "Helpers don't hurt little kids. Helpers don't make people scared. You're just a bad man who tells lies." Danny's face went completely white. The simple truth from a child had cut through all his self-justification and exposed him for what he really was. "Shut up!" he screamed, raising the gun again. "You ruined everything! You ungrateful little—" But he never finished the sentence. Bruno had somehow managed to push against the car door handle with his paws, and the door swung open. The big dog leaped out of the car and tackled Danny to the ground before anyone could stop him. The gun went flying, skittering across the asphalt and coming to rest 20 feet away. Danny tried to push Bruno off, but the dog had him pinned, growling in a way that made it clear he would protect these children with his life. "Good boy, Bruno," Marcus said as he got out of the car and approached cautiously. "You can let go now. We've got him." Detective Walsh slapped handcuffs on Danny while he was still on the ground. "Danny Morse, you're under arrest for child abuse, child endangerment, assault with a deadly weapon, and about 15 other charges we'll discuss downtown." As Danny was loaded into a police car, he kept screaming about how everyone had it wrong, how he was trying to help, how the children were manipulative liars who had destroyed a good thing. But nobody was listening anymore. Lucy and Tommy were safe in Marcus's car, with Rita holding them both tightly. Bruno had returned to his position beside them, his tail wagging for the first time all day. "Is it really over?" Lucy asked quietly. Marcus knelt beside the open car door. "Yes, sweetheart. Danny can't hurt you or Tommy ever again." "What happens now?" Marcus looked at Rita, who was crying tears of relief and gratitude. He thought about his empty apartment, his lonely evenings, and the daughter he'd lost to his dangerous job. "Now," he said, "we figure out how to be a family." Rita looked up at him through her tears. "Officer Kane, we're not your responsibility." "Maybe not," Marcus admitted, "but you're not just a case to me anymore. You're people I care about." Bruno woofed softly, as if agreeing with the sentiment. 6 months later, Marcus's house looked completely different. There were children's toys in the living room, family photos on the mantle, and a dog bed in every room because Bruno couldn't decide where he wanted to sleep. Lucy was thriving in 2nd grade, where she often brought Bruno for reading sessions with younger students. Tommy was in preschool and hadn't had a nightmare in 2 months. Rita had found a day job that let her be home with her children in the evenings, and Marcus had found something he'd thought was lost forever: a family. The adoption papers were finalized on a sunny Tuesday morning in spring. As they left the courthouse, Lucy tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "Dad," she said, testing out the word that still felt new and wonderful. "What is it, sweetheart?" "Can we stop by the school? I want to show Bruno's friends that everything turned out okay." Marcus looked at his wife Rita, who smiled and nodded. His son Tommy was already running ahead toward the car, calling for Bruno to hurry up. "Of course we can," Marcus said. "I think Bruno would like that too." As they drove toward Roosevelt Elementary, Bruno sat in the back seat between Lucy and Tommy, his tail wagging contentedly. The dog who had once been chained and abandoned had found his purpose, protecting children who needed a voice. And the children who had once carried terrible secrets in a purple backpack had found something even more precious: a family that would never let them face danger alone. The story could have ended differently. But sometimes, when brave children find the courage to speak their truth, and when good adults choose to listen, miracles happen. Sometimes the heroes have four legs and wet noses. Sometimes love really does win. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and share a story about a time when an animal helped someone you know. Your engagement means the world to us and helps us continue bringing you stories that matter.